Okay, I think we'll get started, and then once people continue to jump in, I'll continue to let them in. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tech and Culture Speaker Series. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm the Economic Inclusion Fellow at Center State CEO, and I also will be moderating tonight's event. Before we get started, I wanted to say thank you to our sponsor, JP Chase, for sponsoring this event and sponsoring a lot of the work that we're doing around tech and culture and trying to diversify the tech industry here in Central New York. So once again, thank you, JP Chase, for sponsoring this event. I also want to go over a few ground rules before we get started. So all participants should remain muted throughout the first half of the event. And then, towards the end, I'll open up the floor for any questions that you may have. This session is currently being recorded and will be made available on the Center State CEO website, also on the Generation Next social media page. So if you really enjoyed what our speaker is talking about, you can go back and you can refer people to the Center State CEO page. The chat will be open throughout the entire presentation for comments and questions. But like I mentioned before, we won't get to those towards the end of the event. So you can just drop any comment or question that you have and I'll get to them eventually. And lastly, we will have a short survey that I'll put in the chat just so you can provide feedback on what you took away from the event and what you think needs to be changed going forward for future events. I'll also follow up with an email and send that out via email as well. So now we'd like to introduce our amazing speaker, Buffy Quinn. She's the coordinator of the geospatial science and technology program at OCC. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about the program and her experience working as a geospatial analyst in the past. I will also like to take the time to read her bio. Let me admit someone else. Here we go. Okay. So Buffy Quinn earned her BS in geography from the University of Southern Mississippi and an MA in geography from the University of Denver. Before beginning her full-time teaching career in 2013, she worked for over 20 years as a geospatial analyst focusing on large environmental remediation projects, including Onondaga Lake in Syracuse. Mrs. Quinn now teaches a variety of courses, including meteorology, environmental regulation, geography, natural hazards and disasters, and geographic information systems. She was honored with the State University of New York Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Teaching in 2019. In addition to teaching, Buffy directs the Geospatial Science and Technology AAS program at OCC and serves as the principal investigator on the National Science Foundation project to integrate UAV data analysis credential into the curriculum. That's a lot, Buffy. So without further ado, the floor is yours. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Marcus. It's a lot, but I'm old. So I've just had a lot of years to do all that kind of stuff. So yeah. I really appreciate your inviting me here today to talk to everybody.
Of course.
And before I get started, I just wanted to tell folks that I kind of am anticipating 3 different audiences out there. So the first one would be students, folks who are perhaps interested in entering a technology field, but not quite sure that they have the chops. You do, I promise. And perhaps students who are interested in geospatial technologies, but aren't quite sure sort of what that means. Students who might be interested in our program at OCC. And then the second audience would be people who are interested in helping our students in this program. People in industry who perhaps would be willing to help me with designing curricula, with offering internships or job placement opportunities, job shadowing even, mentorships, coming onto campus to work with our students. Getting students involved in the community is a really important part of the work that I do at OCC, and a way of helping to build community, sort of also leaning into Mayor Walsh's idea of getting students ready for this 4th industrial revolution, this high-tech industrial revolution with data science and UAS technologies. So if you're a student, I want to talk to you a little bit about my experience and being a woman, especially in a high-tech field, and sort of what that was like for me and how I maneuvered. And if you're a grown-up and you know a student who might enjoy this discipline, be on the lookout for ways that you can get in touch with me. And then if you're a grown-up who thinks you might like to contribute to the program. So it's kind of a wide audience. folks. So I hope there's something for everybody. I thought I'd start by telling you sort of how I got involved in this industry. Marcus, I'm gonna set up my, there we go. Okay, now I can kind of see everybody there. Okay, I got started with technology really early, and it was in the 9th grade. I grew up in Clinton, Mississippi. Some people say I kind of have a Southern dialect, so I grew up in Mississippi. And in the 9th grade, we got to go to the high school and just sort of get a tour, right? So this is Mississippi. It's like the end of the school year. It's like June, you know. And we go to the high school campus, and there's one air-conditioned building on campus, and it happens to be the VOTEC building. And when I went in there, I saw there was boys, all boys, at these big drafting tables, and they had like electronic erasers. I'd never seen such a thing, and like fancy pens and pencils. And so I said, well, that's pretty cool. So I signed up for drafting in the 10th grade. And I was the only girl in the drafting class. And when I say that it was probably air conditioning, not so much the technology that really got me started, I really loved it. And we did mechanical drafting. I learned how to, draw the threads on a screw and do exploded drawings of machine cams and things. And I could never figure out sort of why that was male dominated, because, you really had to be very precise, and, everything had to be very neat and tidy. And to me, it didn't seem like there would be any kind of gender division of that kind of work. And I really enjoyed it. I was in VICA, the Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. My parents kind of freaked out because they thought that meant that I was just going to be, just a drafter, but I really loved it. And then I continued, I took architectural drafting later in high school. I got accepted to Mississippi State University into their architecture program. And I was very honored to be selected to enter, but I did not do a good job. I didn't really get architecture. And this is kind of one of those first moments where my sort of financial situation really hindered my academic progress. So I grew up in a home that would be absolutely considered working poor. My mom was a single mom, 2 kids. There were times of food insecurity, eviction notices, that kind of stuff. So, it wasn't great. We were not flush, right? So I go to college, I'm all on scholarship. I'd been working all through high school. I saved up my money, and I was in I was in an architecture class. And they told me that we were going to have to buy watercolors for a project, including a $12 watercolor brush. Y'all, I broke down in tears. I didn't have $12 for a watercolor brush. I thought it was ridiculous. Like, I am like living on ramen noodles and tap water, and then $12 for a brush. It was ridiculous. And now, if there's some students out there, the message that I hope that you would take from this is that $12 kicked me out of that program. I left because I realized it was just too expensive. Like, all the supplies they were asking me to buy, I was having to borrow, and it was really tough. I was selling textbooks to buy art supplies. It was not a great situation. And looking back on that, and now, like, as an educator, if a student ever came to me and said, I'm going to have to drop this class because I can't afford a $12 brush, I would figure out a way to get that brush, whether it's out of my pocket or I would ask an industry partner to donate some supplies. I would have figured out a way to do it. So if you are a student and you encounter this in your school, wherever school it is, please let somebody know. There are so many people out there who want to help you. Don't let that happen to you, because I dropped out of an architecture program that I was really lucky to get into for $12, essentially, right? So don't do that. So I left Mississippi State. I left the School of Architecture, and I transferred to another school that had kind of more of an urban campus because I knew I could get a job. So I transferred to the University of Southern Mississippi. And if any of you are Green Bay fans, that is where Brett Favre played, and we were there at the same time. So yes, it was very excellent college football. So while I was at Southern Miss, I majored in geography because I realized that there was this job called cartography, which was map making. It's like, that is so cool. Like, I did my drafting in high school. I kind of, I liked the whole drawing thing. I liked the tools. And so I said, oh, map making, that's all, I always loved the maps and National Geographic. I said, that's really awesome. So I entered the geography department, and y'all, I was the only girl again. I was the only woman geography major at the University of Southern Mississippi. So this was 1988. I mean, that makes me really feel old. But yeah, the only woman geography major. Again, I never really thought of that as being like, like super masculine or anything. It just never occurred to me that that would be something I couldn't do. And I think I probably have like my mom to thank for that kind of attitude, like of course I can do anything that I work hard enough to do. Y'all, so when she started her job with the state of Mississippi at the medical center, so I was like in second grade, so like 1977, she wasn't even allowed to wear pants to work. She had to wear like pantyhose and skirts and like pointed shoes. It was nuts. I can't believe how far we've come in one generation. So anyway, I could thank her for that, instilling in me that idea that, there shouldn't be jobs that are for men and jobs that are for women. If it's something I like to do, you just do it. And so I did. I loved geography. In addition to cartography, I also focused on something called aerial photo interpretation. I was essentially a Department of Defense trained cartographer because it was a state school, and all of our images that we use like in our laboratories and stuff are sort of declassified Department of Defense images. So it's like, I never wanted to be a warmonger. It just worked out that way that like I learned how to take measurements from photos. It's called photogrammetry, and then interpret like vegetation and stuff on photos. But this was real photos, like actual black and white film. That's how long ago it was. So I also took like the very first classes in what we would recognize as geographic information systems. So that was very early in the technology. I feel like I really kind of got in on the very kind of ground floor of this technology, which is kind of cool, but also a little overwhelming because it changes so much, like exponential, that curve of how that technology changes. It's really crazy. So from there, in that program at Southern Miss, I was required to get an internship. And so I did. I found an internship at a local engineering company called Neil Schaefer. They still exist. They do sort of general civil engineering and things like that. But remember, see, I'd done all that drafting in high school, and then I did cartography in college. And so I was making maps for reports and figures and big maps for public meetings, but I did them all by hand, like on paper with pens and markers. And like if you had a big area that you wanted to like color in like blue, so now really on my GIS, I can just click blue a little bit. It would be, it's like a cling film. You have to use an X-Acto blade, and you cut around and you peel off the film, and then you put it on your map. Yes, and you can imagine you get wrinkles and stuff and you have to fix it. But really, that was like so old school. I was making maps by hand. It was really fun. It taught me a lot. But I learned there that I could use AutoCAD, which is computer-aided drafting, to do digital mapping. And y'all, that was amazing, because now I realized I could use a computer to draw a map and then make edits to it. So that was like this huge technological breakthrough for me. And imagine the time saving and stuff. I was always really good at like hand lettering and drawing, and I liked all the different pens and pencils for hand drawing, but the computers, like just crazy. And so this would have been like 1990, right? Computers aren't at all what they are now. There's a lot of lag time, a lot of processing time. But I enjoyed that job very much, but decided that I would further my studies at the University of Denver in their geography department. Now, here's another tip for the students out there. If you think you want to go to graduate school in a STEM field, you rarely have to pay for that. So if you're going to like medical school or law school or a professional degree, you're going to pay, right? But if you go into a STEM field, what you do is you look for places that offer what's called an assistantship. So like you teach, like you learn how to teach while you're a graduate student, and you'll teach like labs and things like that, or you'll get a research assistantship. So you will like assist a professor with his or her research, that kind of thing. And usually that stipend is not very much, but what it comes with is tuition. So I could do that. So I went to the University of Denver. And Denver was, you can imagine like the polar opposite of the University of Southern Mississippi. When I moved from Hattiesburg, Mississippi to Denver, Colorado, my winter jacket was just like an unlined denim jacket, like a Levi's. Didn't have any lining or anything in it. I was in for a rude awakening. It was so cold and snowy. You can see now in Syracuse, I'm fine. I've done it, but it was a big shift. So in graduate school, I learned that I really liked teaching. I got a teaching assistantship, and I taught labs, and I really liked that. I focused on environmental modeling. I did something called dendroclimatology. I took tree cores and with a microscope measured the width of each tree ring, and then created a model. So I had like hundreds of trees, yes, hundreds of trees, hundreds of little tiny tree cores under the microscope, and I measured all those little rings, and I built a model of what the climate must have been like while those trees were alive. Like you can look at the tree ring and sort of build a model and to know if it was like really hot year, because the trees put on a ring every year. And so you could do if it was a hot year or a really rainy year or a year with lots of forest fires, and you could model that. So then I took that model and sort of backcast it. So I did environmental modeling. It sounds so fancy, but my gosh, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And we didn't have like crazy awesome computers too. So it was a lot of programming, and I was such a nerd, y'all. It's crazy. So I liked that very much. And that work got me a job at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And there I did mapping with this brand new crazy technology called geographic information systems. So this would have been in 1993. And I was an on-site contractor for the EPA, and I remember we had a big workstation. So laptops, nobody had those. And I remember that on our workstation, the IT guy came in. He said, "Okay, we're going to load up some stuff. We're going to really give your desktop machines an overhaul. We're going to install 1 gigabyte of storage space." We flipped out. A gigabyte of storage space? What will we possibly do with all of that space? Y'all, it's like going from a trailer to like a huge mansion and say, what are we going to do with all of this space? There's no way we can do enough work and enough data to fill up a gigabyte. And y'all, now they give away 12 gigabyte little flash drives. But at that time, the computing power was just not what it is now. So we were doing, and I say we, I mean the team of folks I work with, we were using geographic information systems. Now what those are is it links sort of the map itself, like that map that I could draw with like AutoCAD, whatever. So it links that map to data. So you have a database over here, And all of the rows and columns have information in it. And so all of those rows and columns, actually all those rows, are linked to a location on that map. So the geographic information systems allow you to do all kinds of analysis. You can start to see patterns on the landscape. So imagine if you have just rows and rows and rows and columns of demographic data. It's hard to make sense of it, but if you put it on a map, then you can start to see patterns of economic inequity or demographic groupings, right? Or movement of people from urban to rural areas and vice versa. So we use geographic information systems at the EPA to look at the relationship between communities of color, poverty, and whether or not those neighborhoods were more impacted by hazardous waste siting practices. That's what became known as looking at environmental justice issues. Now, I really enjoyed that work. It felt real and it felt like it was useful. I did a lot of work on Superfund sites in looking at sort of the data quality of Superfund sites and are people collecting the data correctly. I was also part of a survey crew. Now, I did a little surveying when I was at Neil Schaefer, and not a lot of women at the time were doing land surveying. And the position I had traditionally was called rod man, but I am not a man. I was the rod woman, and the rod woman is you hold the rod that they use to triangulate things. So we did some of that surveying at the EPA, and so the GPS capabilities of your cell phone, y'all, in 1993 at the EPA. So this is the federal government, right? They have the money to invest in like the best equipment. The GPS units that we had, it was a huge backpack. And it like the antenna like stuck over your head, and there's like a big dish like out of your head. You looked crazy, but that was like the most advanced technology there was, the most advanced sort of spatial capturing method out there. Finding your location using satellites and triangulating to this one point. Now I do it with my students and we use our cell phones. The technology has just changed so fast and it's so much easier. And it's far more accurate. So even with these really great leaps forward, we're getting better. So I was introduced to a term while I was at the EPA called imposter syndrome. Students, this is for you. Sometimes you're going to enter a room, or you're going to be on a project team, or your boss is going to call you and ask you to do something. Now, you've been asked to do this because you have obviously demonstrated some quality that made this person invite you to do this task, or to take part in this meeting, or to tackle a topic or a project that might be a little difficult. And you might think, there's no way I can do that. I'm just me. I don't know enough. I'm not smart enough. That's how I felt like when I went to Denver. It's like, I'm not smart enough to teach other people. Oh my God. Imposter syndrome, like people think that I am somehow better or worth more than I do. Y'all go with it. Those people are seeing something in you that you're not seeing. If someone asks you to take on a challenge that you think might be too difficult, or like address a technology that perhaps you don't have that much experience in, or test out this new software, or to lead this team of people, and you don't feel like you have like leadership qualities, they do. That's why they ask you to do it. So take those challenges head on. It may be difficult, but I think you'll find that you'll build that confidence, and that if someone else sees it in you, go with it. Okay, there you go. All right, so that's what happened to me. Someone suggested that I could enter a PhD program. I was like, oh no way am I smart enough to do that. So, but I did. We were working at the EPA, And the company I worked for sort of lost its contract. And so we had the option of going with a new company or doing something else. And I said, well, to heck with it, I'll just try. I'd always wanted to live in the Northeast, kind of in a Rust Belt city, as crazy as that sounds. And Syracuse is like one of the best geography departments in the country. So I applied and I got in. I couldn't believe it. Not only did I get in, but I got a stipend to pay my tuition. I got a teaching assistantship, and so it tuition paid. But when I got here, I didn't love it. I mean, I could do it, but I didn't love it. But what I did love was Syracuse. The more that I found out about Syracuse and its history, I just fell in love with this place. And because I had like all these mad skills, right? All these GIS skills and these mapping skills and stuff like that, I saw an ad for a job at O'Brien and Gear as a drafter, as a drafting technician, working on the Onondaga Lake cleanup project. Now, I was always interested in Superfund sites anyway, right, because of my EPA background. And y'all, the Onondaga Lake Superfund cleanup project is fascinating. It is the largest sediment remediation project in history, and just in our backyard, Onondaga Lake. So when I saw that job come available, I applied for it and I got it. So I dropped out of my PhD program at Syracuse University and went to work at O'Brien and Gear, which is now Rambo, and worked on the Onondaga Lake cleanup. I worked there for a while. I decided I wanted to start my own GIS consulting business. And I did that for a while. I liked being my own boss. But I have to admit, I kind of missed people. I kind of missed being in an office with other people and working as a team. And I got a call from a headhunter. Now, a headhunter is a person who will sort of see a resume out there or hear of you through some other channel. Could be through LinkedIn now or just through any of the groups that, called me up and asked me if I would be interested in taking a job at Parsons, another engineering company doing work on Onondaga Lake. And I did, just really another chance, another opportunity, something new to try. I think I thrive on change and having, new projects and new ideas and meeting new people, doing really cool stuff. So I was a GIS analyst. I was also a principal scientist. I was responsible for modeling the contamination in the lake bottom sediments of Onondaga Lake, modeling how contamination would move from upland sources into the groundwater and then up into the lake. And then helping with the DEC with like doing community participation plans and things like that. So I had a lot of really great experiences there at Parsons. I started teaching part-time at OCC, kind of on a whim. So I'm at Parsons, I'm digging it, I'm really liking it, right? I love the work that's going on. But I saw an ad that OCC was hiring meteorology part-time professors. And if you remember, like way back when I was at Denver, I did that climate modeling. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a part of my academic career that I really haven't been able to explore and use very much. Because way back when I was at Denver, I thought I might end up at an organization like the National Center for Atmospheric Research or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So when I saw that up, I said, yeah, that sounds fun. So just kind of on a whim, I applied for that part-time job and I got it. That was in 2009. And so I kept my part-time job. I worked part-time at OCC. And in 2013, a full-time position became available to teach meteorology and geographic information systems. So there was no plan, there was no path. It just kind of happened that those were exactly my skills. So I got that job. And then while at OCC, I developed this new program called Geospatial Science and Technology. So geospatial science and tech includes really three big categories. The first one is GIS, Geographic Information Systems. Remember, linking the data to the map so you can do analysis and draw comparisons and see patterns and make decisions. Another component of geospatial technology is GPS, so location gathering. And then the third part is this thing called remote sensing. And that is gathering information about the Earth from afar. We did that when I was an undergrad with black and white photos, my air photo interpretation class. And then in the 1970s, the US government started sending up satellites. Landsat was the first one. And those satellites were collecting data, and still are, about the Earth. And so we remotely sense data. We collect data now from the oceans, from land, air, all over the place. And all of that data has a locational component. And that's important because that means that we can put it on that map. And then because we have all of this data from all these different sources, we can start to layer that data like a big, giant, deliciously wonderful layer cake of information. And what's cool is as we layer that information, we start to see even new patterns emerge. So now it's not just in 2D, it becomes in 3D. Then if we add time, we get another dimension. So we can see all that happening in space and over time. It's pretty cool, right? So geospatial science and tech takes those three different components and puts it all together. So you can sort of see how we can collect data and make decisions about the world. Another cool thing about this program is this. I got show and tell. This is a little Mavic Air 2. Some of you may call this a drone. I prefer to call it an unmanned aerial vehicle right here. Now, what we do with these in the geospatial science and tech program is we use them to collect data. So I don't have to use black and white pictures anymore. I don't even have to get satellite imagery. I can go and collect it in real time, exactly where I want it. So that little UAV will collect data in a way that I can put into my geographic information system to create just another one of those fantastic layers. And then imagine if I go out like every day for a month or every spring for 10 years. That adds that extra time element in there. So you can see how we can start to model the world and different things that are happening in it. And then how is the natural world and the human world, like how are we interacting and how are things changing? So one of the ways that I am integrating these UAV technologies into this program is with a National Science Foundation grant. I am the principal investigator for a grant where we are building pathways for students, starting with high school students who come into OCC, who can major in our program, work with industry specialists, either managers in geospatial science and tech or practitioners, hooking students up for internship opportunities, job shadowing, that kind of thing, and even work after they complete their associate's degrees. This program will also transfer directly down to SUNY Cortland for students who would like to get a 4-year degree in geographic information systems. They also have a very active UAV program. This is the new way to collect data. No more having to go out with a giant surveying crew. We can just collect it with that. And then we are also working on some more transfer opportunities, like perhaps with SUNY Oneonta. So it's designed to get students either to work in the very, very big growth industry, especially here in Central New York, in UAS technologies. So UAV is unmanned aerial vehicle, and UAS is unmanned aerial system. The system includes like all the stuff that goes with it, like all of the communications parts and all the software and things. So that is where I am today. Just kind of seeked out air conditioning that hot June day in Mississippi, and ended up now doing some really cool stuff with some awesome students. I'm really excited about the future of geospatial technologies and UAS technologies here in Central New York. And I hope to get more students in the program. This is a career that offers a better than living wage, fantastic working conditions, and the jobs are out there. It's a great place to be now, especially as we're entering the fourth industrial revolution. So Marcus, that's really all I had to say today. I think we're about on time, right, for questions?
Definitely, definitely. That's an amazing story, Buffy. Truly appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Marcus. Thanks.
Definitely. So I wanted to open up the floor for any questions you may have for Buffy based on what she just presented. You can drop them in the chat and I'll read them off to her, or you can come off mute and ask her personally.
I saw something in the chat, Marcus, while I was talking, but I didn't get to read it. It popped up.
Saka, I also had my graduate degree in Denver and ended up in Syracuse. Thank you, Buffy, for this presentation.
Oh, wow. What a small world. That's so great.
Yeah.
Wow. What program were you in at University of Denver?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was at UCD doing the information technology and library degree over there, and
That's awesome. Yeah.
that was my
From-
first year coming from Turkey to United States. So it was a huge culture shock for me and everything, but I loved them. It's like my second home over there.
Oh, me too. I really did. So perhaps not the same culture shock as Turkey to the United States, but Mississippi to Colorado, that was huge, huge culture shock. And so I have not lived in Mississippi for like 30 years. So and people tell me like every day, oh, you just moved here, you ought to get snow tires. I'm like, no, I've lived here a long time. But I think when I first moved to Colorado, people could not understand my dialect at all. They would just nod and smile. So that's great. It's a small world. I'm glad you told me. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from James. Were drones used to clean up Onondaga Lake?
They are being used now. The use of sort of the drone for data collection, we didn't use it back when we were collecting data initially. So right now, though, at the lake, the sediment is complete. So first, James, let me tell you too, I haven't worked on the project full time, right, since 2013. And so a lot has happened out there. But I do have people who are working on that project as a part of our program's our business and industry leadership team. So that's kind of how I know what's going on the lake right now. But they're using UAVs now to go in and monitor the construction that's happening along the shoreline of Onondaga Lake, and then some of the upland sites, like 9 Mile Creek is like behind the lake. We had to make sure that the water in Onondaga Lake or in 9 Mile Creek was clean, because if there were any contaminants in that creek, they could migrate into Onondaga Lake. So that continues to be monitored and cleaned up with UAVs. The construction is monitored with UAVs, and I've been lucky enough to go out a couple times as they're using those. They're able to, in real time, go in and collect data, put it on a map, make sure everything is progressing. And what's really cool too is we can collect elevation data with those UAVs as well. So it's not just flat, it's 3D. So we can even look to see for piles of debris or dirt, that kind of thing. So they are using them now.
Thank you, Buffy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that answer. Very fascinating.
Yeah, sure.
So we have a question from Justin. How difficult was it to be the only female in each of such situations?
Sometimes it was hard, but not all the time. most of the time, in most situations, I found that my colleagues, like say when I'm on a survey crew, like the other men on a survey crew, I didn't have any issues at all. I don't feel like they treated me any differently. There are times though, like more in a corporate setting, say that I'm in a room and it would not be unusual that I might be the only woman in the room as we're talking about sort of geostatistics or modeling or cleanup or policy or whatever. And they would always ask me to take notes. And I don't know, because of perhaps the idea that a secretary or a note taker is always female. I realized right away that was happening. And so I said no. That might be one piece of advice to remember, is that no is a complete sentence. You don't have to apologize for not volunteering. I also noticed that sometimes they would expect me to like clean up after a meeting. Oh no, shoot, I don't do that at home. You kidding me? No, I wouldn't do it. So, but it was more often like not people that I worked with closely every day, not like my initial team. It would be like managers or people from outside. Like when I was the only female geography major at Southern Miss, I didn't even notice it at first because my student colleagues were just like so awesome. Sometimes, yeah, it's a thing. I detest being called something other than my name at work, like girlfriend or honey, or I'm just being nice. Like, I don't want people to like talk about my appearance at work, and it happens. As I've gotten older, it's gotten a little easier to maneuver through that. But yeah, sometimes it's tough, but not all the time.
It's a great question, Justin. Thank you. We have a question from Trisha. How did you navigate? I think that was the same one we just read.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trisha,
sometimes it was hard. You have to remember, I had to remember that I didn't get this job because I was less qualified, less intelligent, had fewer skills than anybody else who applied. And having a facade of self-assuredness and confidence always helped. I didn't always feel that way inside, but just recognizing my worth and that I'm not an imposter. Someone asked me to do this because they believed that I could. And so embracing that and going with it. It's hard, but it's possible.
It's great advice. We have a question from Victoria. Did you have initial fears when leaving your program at Mississippi State and SU that you would regret it or feel as if it was a bad decision?
Oh gosh, Victoria, it's a tough question. It's good. It really does get at a lot of feelings. At Mississippi State, I really felt like I didn't have a choice. I couldn't. Mississippi State is kind of a rural campus, and I didn't have a car. I didn't have a bike, and I couldn't work. Like, I had so little money. The way that I did my laundry is I lived in the dorm, but I didn't have a meal plan. I went to every meeting on campus to eat. That's the only way I ate. The way I did my laundry is I would go around and offer to do the laundry of the women in my dorm room. I didn't have any quarters and I didn't have any laundry detergent, but I would do their laundry and just throw my stuff in with it, right? So this idea like of that $12 brush and it just like breaking me, it was just like, that was just enough. So I knew I had to leave Mississippi State. SU was a little tougher to leave. I really did feel like a failure. I finished all my coursework for the PhD, and I just have, it was almost like a divorce with my committee. I had what I call irreconcilable differences with the members of my committee. And I don't know that I could have ever fixed it. And so even though that was probably one of the most difficult decisions that I ever made, I'm glad I did it, because I ended up on a very different path than I think I ever thought I would. And so I don't know if it was just like, this is a better path for me, or if I just completely accepted it. But it was tough. It was not easy at all. So, yeah, Victoria, you got some feelings, man.
Everything happens for a reason, though.
It was tough.
Yeah.
Or we make reasons for stuff that happens, which I
Right.
think is also. So yeah, I just lived with it, and I'm glad I did. It all worked out.
We have a question from Christian. Coming from a not so great economic background, how do you think that shaped your ambition to pursue higher education in geospatial technology?
Christian, I'm so happy you asked me that. So that is the reason that I developed this program. When I was a kid, school was my safe place. Home life was chaotic. There was, in addition to the financial difficulties, there was also alcoholism, there was mental illness, incarceration. It was tough. But school was my safe place. I liked the order of it all. I liked that it's very kind of easy to work the system, right? Here are the rules, and here's what you do, and this is how you succeed. Classroom is orderly, you have your books and your little folders and stuff. So I never really felt like I was like the smartest kid in class. It's like I was never like the straight A kid, but I was always at school because it was a great place to be. And I knew, and even as a little kid, I didn't like know what my career was going to be, but I knew that education was the way out of that life and into this life that I have now, which is far better than when I was a kid. So I knew that education was the path. I was lucky enough to kind of stumble upon this field, this geospatial thing. And that's why I started for the kids, because this is a job that New York State is investing in heavily, especially here in central New York. This UAS technology stuff, the reason these UASs are being used is to help people. We're using them for public safety, but we're also using them to collect data. And the thing that we do with that data is we put it on a map and we analyze it. This is just what happened in the 1970s with satellites. They're sending up all these satellites, collecting all this data. Like, but what's the point? The point is we put into maps and analyze it and make decisions that are going to improve people's lives, right? So these jobs exist. They're great jobs. And if I can take a kid who right now is living in poverty, who perhaps thinks there's nothing better out there, or that this world of high tech is just not even accessible, I want to change that. That's why I do this. I take this show on the road. I want everybody to know about this program at OCC, because I want the kids out there in the city of Syracuse to know that this is an option. It's a real option. And they're not going to have to spend $12 on a paintbrush. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. We have industry partners who are here to help these students. So yes, it absolutely shaped my ambition to not only pursue higher education, but to develop this program for other students who are in either the same situation I was or far worse. So thank you, Christian. Yeah.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Buffy. We have another question from Justin. Are thermal imaging cameras used on the UAVs? And if so, what are the most useful applications?
Oh, yes. Yes, we can put all kinds of sensors on these UAVs. We tend to refer to them as cameras, but camera is, you think of sort of, just paper image. But they're actually sensors, and they're not collecting paper images, they're collecting data. So thermal imaging is really cool. One of the ways that I would like to use thermal imaging is to look at thermal pollution in water, because water that's a higher or lower temperature can either introduce different kind of contaminants or create different habitat stressors for the stuff that lives in the water. You can also detect algae blooms and things like that. Because, okay, in addition to the thermal imaging, you can also use infrared sensors, and you can use infrared to detect the health of vegetation. So with thermal imaging also, you can sort of track animals at night, which is really cool. The UAS sort of research community is looking at ways to increase battery life in UAVs in extremely cold weather, because that is a limitation. But in extremely cold weather, if you have a thermal sensor, you're going to be able to see better, right? So if you got really cold, like anything warm. And so I think they're really trying to use those in some public safety, like to look for lost kids, or for incapacitated adults, like who wander and get lost. So I think that's really cool. I am also really excited about the idea of not unmanned aerial vehicles. We'll call them unpeopled aerial vehicles, right? But unmanned marine vehicles. Actually, the University of Southern Mississippi has a Gulf Coast campus, and they're doing some work there. So I'm going to try to get back into that community and see what we can do, because wouldn't it be fun if we were using aerial vehicles and marine vehicles for Onondaga Lake? I just think that'd be awesome. And here in the Great Lakes region, I think we would have a lot of those. So I think that those are useful applications, especially perhaps with precision agriculture, because you can use different sensors to even detect changes in soil chemistry by looking at that vegetation health. You can use sensors to determine the moisture content of soil. So, gosh, so many applications, Justin. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute, another one. Okay, so in an industrial setting, if you have a big giant like tank, right? People have to go into those tanks and perform tank inspections, but they're so dangerous. Like OSHA's got so many rules. That's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So it's so dangerous. But you can fly a little UAV in there to do an inspection, perfectly safe. You can collect the data in real time with a camera. You can also use them to go into abandoned mines and just to check out sort of if there's any kind of leaks or any safety issues. I love them also too for inspecting power lines and scaffolding, even inspecting wind turbines. And oh my gosh, get a load of this. Okay, last one, I promise. So you know how like you have your iPhone and you have that special like pad and you can just like set the phone on the pad and it recharges? All right, what if we took this, so a wind turbine, right? Huge, tall, very dangerous. What if we could fly this little thing, let it land on top and charge up the batteries in the wind turbine? Wouldn't that be cool? Or if you've got like stream gauging stations like in the mountains and it's cold, it's hard to get there, just fly this little sucker in, let it sit on top of that unit, recharge the batteries. It's amazing. So yeah, it's cool. I haven't done all this, but I want to. Okay, thanks, Justin.
So we have time.
I got to geek out. I got to geek out a little bit, so thanks.
We loved it. time for about one more question if anyone has it.
Oh, y'all are so sweet. I see some thank you notes. I see James says, Professor Quinn, you're awesome. Thank you. That's awesome. Okay, y'all are the best. Thanks.
Okay, if we have no more questions, I just dropped the link. Let me see. I just dropped the link in the chat for our survey. Feel free to visit that page and fill out the survey just to let us know what you learned and what you were expecting coming in and what you got out of the event. I'll also send this out via email. Give me 1 second to share my screen. So if you're looking for additional resources or more upcoming events, you can visit the Center State CEO page. You can always engage with us on social media. That's Generation Next on Facebook and Instagram, and also the Center State CEO website page. And if you have any questions about anything that Buffy presented about today, you can reach out to her. Her email is listed here, and you can reach out to me as well if you have any questions related to Tech and Culture Generation Next, or how you can get involved. So again, thank you, Buffy, for coming in and giving this amazing presentation. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to spend the evening with us, and we'll see you at the next event. Have a great one.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. And get in touch, please.
Thank you.